The Washington Commanders win 20-10 in comeback fashion over the New England Patriots to wrap up their 2024 preseason. And now, just like us, they're going to be turning to their 53-man roster projection, how the game went down, and my 53-man roster projection coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to this live episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credentialed member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday after game days. Appreciate you coming through today, everydayers. Greatly appreciate you coming through every day for your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. If you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode. On this episode, I'm going to give you my 53-man roster projection. It's going to be 100% accurate because that's how these things always work. But first, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders comeback win 20-10 over the New England Patriots to wrap up their preseason. And we're doing so live here on the surface of Commander Field in Landover, Maryland. If you want to discuss this or anything else or get inside information, bonus content at your fingertips via text message, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today, and you'll get all that inside information, bonus content. You can text me your thoughts and your questions as we go through games, press conferences, practices, the whole 9 yards. Again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get involved in that today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, and you'll get a free 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. Usually our post-game episodes, we call them postcasts here at the network. They're going to be about 15 to 17 or so minutes long. But this one's going to be a full-blown episode. This is my full-blown Monday episode because not only are we going to talk about the preseason game that just got finished here in Maryland, but we're also going to talk about the 53-man roster projection that I have coming up to the Washington Commanders' decisions here over the course of the next day and a half or so. They've got to trim their roster down to 53 in their initial active roster before 4 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. So this is going to serve as my my mock draft of the training camp preseason period, which is, of course, going to be 100% accurate, right? So Sunday nights, final preseason game for the Washington Commanders, final preseason game for the New England Patriots, final preseason game for the entire darn National Football League. Primetime Sunday night football, Washington Commanders, New England Patriots. And the scoring all started off with the New England Patriots, Drake May, rookie quarterback, the one that a lot of people kind of talked about. Would it be Drake May? Would it be Jaden Daniels in the NFL draft for the Washington Commanders? Obviously, it turns out to be Jaden Daniels, but Drake May is the one who drives down the field, scores a touchdown on an 18-yard pass to running back Kevin Harris. Chad Ryland kicks the extra point, and the New England Patriots take a 7-0 lead. On that drive, Drake May is, I think it was 5 for 6, 70-something yards, something like that, in the touchdown pass. So if you're a stat scout, and we all know stat scouting is very popular out there, if you're a stat scout, you're like, man, Drake May looking great. You know what I mean? The Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels not playing at all because, of course, he's a starter, so you can't really compare the two. But the reality of it, very, very rough. I mean, I've never 5 for 6 or 6 for 7, things like that typically go a little bit smoother, but certainly some hiccups there. Drake May having a problem taking a snap from under center. He probably put that on him more than anything. And then there was a shotgun snap that was a little bit low, ruled as a fumble as well. So 2 fumbles for Drake May on that drive. One, I would say, is his fault. One is not, of course, his fault. The Washington Commanders wouldn't score at all in the first half. It was a very long, punt-heavy first half for the Washington Commanders. But in the second half, first drive of the third quarter, Trace McSorley, backup quarterback, comes in, drives the ball down the field, and they end up with a 34-yard field goal from Cade York. And Cade York, of course, is the kicker that the Washington Commanders just traded for this past week from the Cleveland Browns for a conditional 7th-round pick. Unconfirmed, but the assumption is the condition of that 7th-round pick actually going to Cleveland is Cade York being the kicker on the team or being on the active roster, I would imagine, for at least the opening week, if not longer. But Cade York, good from 34 yards out, gives the Washington Commanders a trimmed deficit, 7-3. New England comes back, nails their own field goal, extends that lead back out. But then the fourth quarter basically belonged to the Washington Commander. A 33-yard field goal by Cade York trimmed the lead down to 4 once again. And then back-to-back drives, Trace McSorley leading the Washington Commanders offense to touchdowns. Michael Wiley, who's become very, very popular for his preseason performances, runs the ball in from 9 yards out around the left end literally right over here compared to where I'm standing, 9 yards out again. Scores a touchdown. Washington Commanders take their first lead, 13-10. The New England Patriots tried to get down the field, couldn't. Washington Commanders get the ball back, and again, Trace McSorley drives the team down the field. This time finds Martavis Bryant for a 4-yard touchdown pass. The extra point is good. 20-10 is the lead. 20-10 is the final score. The New England Patriots did kind of play, some cute games and call some timeouts and do those things to try to score another field goal before the end of the game. But ultimately, that is how this whole thing goes down. Trace McSorley, the hero of the game for the Washington Commanders, if you're looking for that kind of thing, or if you were, look, I know some people who bet on preseason football. I don't know if you're those people, but I know some people who do that. Interestingly enough, Trace McSorley, also the leading rusher tonight for the Washington Commanders. 4 carries, 40 yards, had a long run of 18 yards. But Michael Wiley is a guy that I know a lot of people are talking about coming out of this preseason. Will he challenge for that third running back spot? Will he earn that third running back spot? I know I've got some insiders who believe he has earned that third running back spot. I will tell you, and we'll talk about this a little bit more here in just a little bit, but the preseason game is absolutely important, but not the whole picture. And certainly what Jeremy McNichols has done in practice, I think, is going to secure him that third spot. But Michael Wiley also gets a touchdown, his second touchdown of the preseason in 3 games. So there's no denying that Michael Wiley certainly has shown that he can play in the National Football League and is at least deserving, at worst, of a practice squad opportunity with the Washington Commanders. We'll see, of course, first and foremost, if he doesn't make the active roster, and then if he doesn't, if he gets picked up by another team on waivers. Overall, Trace McSorley, some interesting things, some impressive things, but a 57% completion rate, not, their greatest completion rate, 125 yards and that touchdown. Jeff Driscoll did not have a great night, but he actually had a higher completion percentage, 66% completed passes, did have an interception, and finished with a 51.4 quarterback rating. Receiving, your leading receiver, running back Chris Rodriguez. This is a third preseason game of all third preseason games. Chris Rodriguez, 4 catches, 39 yards. But of course, the receiver everybody's talking about, Martavis Bryant, the veteran who has not played an active NFL game since 2018, finishing the night 3 catches on 3 targets, 20 yards total. 10 yards was his long, and 4 yards was the touchdown that sealed the deal for the Washington Commanders. Not the game-winning score, but sealing the deal there. And look, Martavis Bryant was instrumental on the go-ahead touchdown drive as well. Before the run by Michael Wiley, Martavis was able to get downfield. Trace McSorley targeted him deep, was able to draw a pass interference flag and set up that score. So Martavis Bryant certainly doing some good things. When we look at the battles to watch, that 6 wide receiver, Martavis was in that mix, right? Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, Jamison Crowder. You assume those 5 are making it. Coming into the night, I think most of us had the favorite for that 6th spot probably being Bryson Tremaine. He's done a lot of good things in training camp. Hasn't necessarily shown up as much in games, and that is a little bit concerning. Meanwhile, Martavis Bryant kind of just showing up to the team, relatively speaking. Hasn't done a lot in practices. Didn't do a lot, initially, but today really kind of showed where his value can come in. Dan Quinn, speaking after the game during his press conference, spoke very highly about Martavis Bryant and some of the things that he can possibly bring. Terry McLaurin, we had an interview with him earlier during training camp on this program, and he was very complimentary of Martavis and his speed, size, combination, those things. And I think he certainly made the conversation more interesting than it was maybe coming into the night. Of course, Byron Pringle would like to have a say about that as well. Cade York, look, I don't think one good night, and it was a good night for Cade York. I don't think you can just sit back and say, boom, we've got our kicker. We don't need to do anything else. I do still expect competition, but Cade York certainly a very solid debut here for the Washington Commanders. That third running back, we've already kind of touched on a little bit, and then Cole Turner, 4th tight end. I got some texts from some insiders during the game that said Cole can't possibly be on this active roster, but we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. Coming up next with my 53-man roster projection. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by LinkedIn. And when you're hiring for your small business, you're going to want to find quality professionals that are right for the role you're trying to fill. And that's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. But it's not just any other job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for new jobs, but may be open to the perfect opportunity. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like professionals. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for their hiring. So join that 2.5 million member group. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now that the preseason is over, training camp is a wrap. It is time to go over I usually say our, but I'm not going to put this on you. I'm going to put this solely on my shoulders, my 53-man roster projection. Listen, if we get it 100% right, it'll be ours. But if we get it wrong, it'll be mine. How about we work that deal out? Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen today. And your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get your daily insight on the best fantasy football draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I just had my fantasy draft Sunday morning, and I got to tell you, the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast certainly helped me with my strategy. I had the number one overall pick, which in my opinion, and everybody has different opinions, but my opinion, the number one overall pick in a 12-team snake draft is terrible, miserable. I had to go outside my comfort zone in quite a few spots, but I feel pretty good about what I was able to do. Got Brian Robinson, got Jaden Daniels, so I got a couple of Commanders playmakers on the team that I think are going to help me out and win my league this year. Of course, both of those guys will be on the active roster. Who else is going to join them on the active roster? So we're going to start here with the offense. I got my active roster right here. Shout out to Donna Hopkins of Pro Football Plus. She negotiated or orchestrated. We had a bunch of beat members that are formally friendly, right? Kind of just for bragging rights, talking about who can get the most correct 53-man roster projections for this season. So hopefully we can come through here. But obviously, quarterback Jaden Daniels is going to be on the roster. Joining him as the second quarterback is going to be Marcus Mariota. That's my projection. So you got two quarterbacks. We're not taking three quarterbacks into this season. I do have a little bit of a gut feeling. This isn't a report. This is kind of my own gut feeling. Sam Hartman has been dealing with a shoulder issue. I kind of feel like that might be a situation where they say, look, you're a rookie, you're undrafted, you're a lot of potential. Let's play it safe, put him on IR, and then maybe Jeff Driscoll can come back in as a practice squad quarterback, emergency third quarterback, all those kinds of things for the team. But I do think Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota start us off right there. In the running back room, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, automatic. They're your 1-2. I do have Jeremy McNichols as the third. I do agree that Michael Wiley has certainly made it a conversation, but I still believe Jeremy McNichols will win that job. And I think they're going to lean on that veteran experience. Anthony Lynn knows him very well. So I think that's going to be kind of what puts him over. And I don't think we're keeping four running backs on the Washington Commanders roster this year. I say we, of course, I'm talking about me doing the fourth running back. What's going to be interesting is Michael Wiley and Chris Rodriguez Jr. Chris Rodriguez Jr. did some good things out here on the field today, but I have to admit he's been a little bit quiet this preseason, more quiet than he needed to be. And I'm a little bit concerned if they don't keep two running backs, maybe Chris Rodriguez is the odd man out on the practice squad, that is, and Michael Wiley gets that spot because he certainly deserves to be around. If not here, he certainly deserves some attention from NFL teams. At the wide receiver position, obviously, again, Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, Jamison Crowder, those guys are pretty much your automatics. I have Bryson Tremaine making this roster. However, Martavis Bryant has certainly made that projection a lot more uncomfortable for someone like me picking Bryson Tremaine. I think Bryson Tremaine's had a really great training camp. I wish you guys could see all the things he's been doing in practice. The only question is, I mean, game tape matters most. Like, bottom line, game tape matters the most. And you wonder if Bryson did enough in training camp practices, meetings, workouts, all that stuff to overcome the lack of preseason flashes, right? Those kinds of things. And Dan Quinn has talked about flashing before and said it's not necessarily critical for a player to flash anyway. We all love flashes. We love seeing those highlight plays on game tape and all that stuff, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite. So again, we'll see if, and we're going to kind of basically find out, does the veteran experience plus the preseason performance, especially here in this final game, trump the consistent training camp practice performances that Bryson Tremaine has been putting together? We will find that out. But either way, I think it's 6 wide receivers. I don't think they go 7. So I think it's either Bryson Tremaine or Martavis Bryant. After that, I don't think you're getting anybody else. Offensive line, we're keeping 10 offensive linemen. Of course, left tackle Brandon Coleman, the rookie, is going to be there. Left guard Nick Allegretti. Your center is going to be Tyler Biotish. Right guard Sam Cosmi. Right tackle Andrew Wiley. And then looking at your backup offensive lineman, I think Cornelius Lucas is going to be in there. Chris Paul has been getting some tackle reps. Also some guard reps is going to be in there. Michael Dieter is your backup center who's got some guard ability. Trent Scott is your veteran tackle. I'm not going to call him a swing tackle because Cornelius is going to be your swing tackle, but Trent Scott's also going to be out there. And then Ricky Stromberg, who's got guard and center ability, as well, making the roster. That leaves us on offense with the tight end room. And actually, let's stick with offense real quick because I know Braden Daniels let's go with the line for real quick because I know Braden Daniels has a cult following. He's got a lot of people out there who really like him. Look, I like the kid as well. And I will say, I think that this training camp period, these practices, Braden Daniels has looked as good as he's ever looked. Certainly has looked improved, but I don't think he's done just quite enough to stick on this roster. I do think maybe a practice squad candidate there for young Braden Daniels. And then looking at the tight end room, the question here is whether or not the Washington Commanders are fixated on keeping a fourth tight end, because bottom line, guys, and I'm a big Cole Turner fan as a person to person, man to man, all that stuff, right? But the bottom line is Cole Turner simply has not done enough to justify making the active roster this season. I think when you look at Zach Ertz, when you look at John Bates, when you look at Ben Sinnott, you can look at all those guys and say, yeah, those guys have absolutely shown potential if they're young, experience if they're veterans, the ability to produce for this team, day in, day out, all that stuff. Cole Turner has not only not looked like he's improved as a pass blocker or as a run blocker, but he's actually at times looked like he's regressed as a receiver. Not so much from like a route running combination sort of thing, but so much for catching. He's dropped passes in practice. He's dropped passes in games. Specifically, I think one of the worst ones of this training camp preseason period was during the joint practice against the Miami Dolphins. He went up for a ball that was thrown perfectly down the seam by his quarterback. Yeah, you got to turn around. You got to make the catch. But that's the kind of a play that you're expecting to make in the National Football League. He brings in the ball. The defender hits him from behind. The ball comes popping out and ends up being an easy interception for the Miami Dolphins defense. That is the type of play that you simply just cannot make in the NFL, especially if you're going to be the fourth tight end on a roster who's known for your ability to catch over everything, right? And I just kind of look at when you look at these roster makeups, and I've asked a lot of other reporters this, right? And Bryson Tremaine, certainly not a tight end, but you kind of ask them, is Cole Turner really a better blocker than Bryson Tremaine would be in a similar situation if he were to be cross-trained to be kind of that fourth tight end if they needed it or when they needed it? And to a person, everybody said, no, Cole Turner's not a better blocker. And I said, okay, then can Bryson Tremaine do some of the things as a receiver that Cole Turner can do? And you believe that he probably can or possibly can or has shown the ability to. So when you come to the decision of keeping a sixth or even a seventh wide receiver versus keeping a guy like Cole Turner just because you absolutely want to keep that fourth tight end, that's a very difficult discussion to have, I think. My gut leans towards the Washington Commanders really wanting that fourth tight end on the roster because of that. That guy would be Cole Turner. Colson Yankoff is kind of the last tight end in that room. He's gotten some action in the preseason. Again, hasn't really flashed or done anything to prove that he's, better at this stage, undrafted free agent. So I think he's a practice squad, designation waiting to happen. But again, if you're just looking at the best 53 players on this roster, it's really hard to put Cole Turner there right now. So we'll see what the Washington Commanders decide to do. I do have him on 53-man roster projection, but simply, again, like I said, because I feel like this team is going to keep 4 tight ends. So again, nobody's told me that. Tight end coach hasn't told me that. Head coach hasn't told me that. It's just kind of the vibe that I get from being around the team. Again, if they were to keep 7 receivers, keep Martavis, keep Bryson Tremaine, and maybe if you need that 4th tight end, and again, how often are you going to need your 4th tight end, right? We know they're going to run a lot of, 2 tight end sets, all that kind of stuff. But if you need a 4th quote unquote tight end, I think Bryson Tremaine honestly brings you about as much performance potential at this point as Cole Turner does. So for me, if you were absolutely fixated on getting that guy, I would probably stick there. We're going to do defense next, but real quick, special teams. Obviously, Tress Way is going to be your punter. Tyler Rotch, your long snapper. And then for right now, Cade York's going to be your kicker. I do believe after the roster cuts are made by all the other NFL teams, you're probably going to see another kicker brought in and at least a week of competition leading up to week 1 in Tampa Bay to solidify that position. But I think Cade York, look, trading for him, brought him in early. He got a head start. Certainly today in his debut, made good for that head start. So that's our offense. That's our special teams. We're up to 28, which means we got 25 more spots to fill. And we'll do that next coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, so they deserve to be talked about a lot. Well, we got something a little bit different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, you can bet $5 and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, as long as you have a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. The Commanders were favored by 2.5 points coming into this final preseason game against the England Patriots. And clearly they covered that line. So if you put $5 on it, not only did you win your bet, but you're also getting 3 weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket for free thanks to FanDuel. And if you missed out on that line, right now the Washington Commanders are 3-point underdogs in week 1 on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But let me tell you something about odds makers if you don't already know this. Typically, home teams get about a field goal spot anyway. So when it's a little bit of a push. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I've got pretty good noise canceling technology, but I'm going to assume that one defeated it a little bit. That was pretty close and pretty loud. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Commanders. We're going to wrap up this episode, wrap up our 53-man roster projections. We're now going to turn to the defensive side of the ball. We've got 25 more players to add in here. We're going to start with the defensive line. Our defensive ends, we're looking at Clelin Ferrell, KJ Henry, Dorrance Armstrong, and then I've got Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Andre Jones Jr. making this list. And the reason you might be wondering why I have so many edge rushers on this list, I've also got 4 defensive tackles, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, John Ridgway III, and Jerzon Newton, Johnny Newton. My concern is that Johnny Newton's going to end up going on the pup to start the season, which means he'll be unavailable for the first 4 weeks of the year. And if that's the case, guys like Clelin Ferrell, Dorrance Armstrong, they've shown that they can reduce down inside if they really need to, kind of more of a defensive tackle type package. So that leaves you other edge rushers to kind of help out there on the defensive line if you need them. And I think that Andre Jones and Javonte Jean-Baptiste have both kind of shown some good ability. So I feel like they're both going to stick. If one of those guys is out, I do think it's probably Andre Jones Jr. And I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the 7th-round rookie from this year's draft class, probably gets the nod there. Turn over to the linebacker position, outside linebacker. I got Dante Fowler Jr., Jamin Davis on one side. Frankie Louvu is also the other outside linebacker. So only 3 outside linebackers, but in total, we've got more. So middle linebackers, Bobby Wagner, Jordan McGee. I'll get to that here in just a second because I think Jordan McGee is going to go on IR. Now, he had a meniscus procedure. Dan Quinn said it's not season ending, and that's fine. But if he's not going to be available for the first 6, 7, whatever weeks it is of the NFL season, I see the Washington Commanders putting him on IR, which will then open up a spot. But he'll be on the initial active roster to be there first, and then he'll go on IR, and then they'll go ahead and open up a spot for somebody like maybe Anthony Pittman or something like that. But I do think Jordan McGee, just for the sake of being on the initial active roster so he can go to IR, will make it there. Cornerbacks, we're going to go nickel and perimeter at the same time. We got Mike Sanders still, Noah Igbenogany. Those are your slot guys. Benjamin St. Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Michael Davis rounding out that group. So not making that list, Tariq Castro-Fields, who had a really good opening of training camp, was really balling out, making a lot of plays, flashing, wasn't getting a lot of interceptions, was getting a lot of PBUs. Unfortunately, kind of faded away a little bit. If they find room to add another corner, I do think it will be Tariq. So I think he's right there on the cusp, kind of on the edge. But right now, I've got him as the outside guy looking in. Safeties, Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin, Derek Forrest, Jeremy Reeves, Dominique Hampton, and Tyler Owens. That's a lot of safeties. You're probably going like, whoa, dude, why so many safeties? Well, for one, Dominique Hampton's also been getting linebacker reps, so he's got that versatility. Tyler Owens has been making plays. We've been talking about him quite a lot. And then again, I asked Dan Quinn specifically about the safety position, defensive backs getting a little bit more of an edge over some of these last roster spots compared to linebackers of the past. You'd see like 5 or 6 off-ball linebackers because they brought that special teams. Here on this roster, I've only got 3, but Dominique Hampton, again, playing that reduced role. Jeremy Chin comes in and plays that reduced role. Tyler Owens can also come in and play in the box. So you have guys that can kind of do that for this defense, but they also bring special teams ability. So I think that's why you end up with the look that you do. So that's 25 defenders. Again, as with mock drafts, I'm sure that I'm going to nail all of these, and we will be celebrating a perfect 53-man roster. But it is 12:30 in the morning, Monday morning, so I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to head home. I appreciate all of you coming through and joining me for this live episode. Coming up next, we will talk again on Tuesday. I haven't decided yet. We're going to drop a Tuesday morning episode leading into the 53-man roster projection. Moves are going to start coming in, so if something big happens or something that just kind of requires a big episode, we'll do that. If not, we'll probably wait until the 4 p.m. deadline comes and goes, or at least until we get notification that, hey, this is the initial 53-man roster. We'll do a projection or a reaction episode, talk about those. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is reach out to me. Send me a text message by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Now make the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast your next listen of the day. Get your daily insight into the best fantasy football strategies so you can win your league. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do, especially 12:30 in the morning after a preseason game. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, please be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.